Hello students, this video is about finding the distance and the midpoint. Now the distance formula you should already kind of know. The distance formula is the distance equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. In order to use the distance formula, the only thing you really have to do is label the points x1, y1, x2, y2, and just plug into the formula. Let's say that we're trying to find the length of segment TR. Well, if T is the point 5, 2 and R is the point -4, -1, well, let this one be x1, y1, and this one be x2, y2. Then we just plug into the formula. So we have x2, -4 minus x1 plus y2 minus y1. Alright, and then you just solve from there. -4 minus 5 is -9. 9 squared is 81. -1 minus 2 is -3. -3 squared is +9. Notice that you're always going to get positive numbers for distance. You're never going to get a negative under the square root, which would cause us to get those nasty imaginary numbers. Nope, we're always going to have positive distance. Alright, so the answer is square root of 90. Okay, now the one thing that people always mess up with, that sometimes people mess up with distance formula, is they won't label the points right. So just remember, they're in alphabetical order. First X, then Y. Alphabetical order. And one point is, they're always labeled 1, 1, 2, 2. Like this point T is labeled, is numbered 1, and this point is labeled number 2. You would never have a point that would be labeled, you would never have x1 and y2 on the same point. That's not allowed, because that whole point is either the first point or that whole point is either the second point. But you wouldn't mix them like that. Alright, so that's distance formula you just plug in. Let's look at finding segments. Okay, segment sections. So, they ask you here to take a segment and to break it down into pieces. The first thing that you need to do is decide what ratio they're talking about. So, let's say I have a segment. Let's say I have a segment going from A to B. Are they asking you to find the middle of the segment? Are they asking you to find 2/3, 1/3? What are they asking you to find? Let's say there's a point P here. They need to decide what ratio you're talking about. Alright, and then what you're going to do is you're going to find the rise and the run of that segment. Find the slope, the rise and the run. Alright, after you find the slope, you're going to multiply that slope by whatever ratio they asked you for. So you're going to find a percent of the rise, not the whole rise, but just part of it. And not the whole run, but just part of it. You're going to multiply by a percentage, by your ratio. Okay? Then you're just going to add those numbers to your original point to figure out where your new point is. You're going to add that increase to the original. Alright, so here's what I mean when I say that. Let's see if we can find the midpoint of AB if A is the point -2, 3 and B is the point 8, 2. Alright, in order to find the midpoint, you have to think to yourself, what ratio are we talking about? Well, the midpoint, that's in the middle. So the middle is going to be like halfway. So we want the halfway point. Okay, going to the middle, that's half. So our ratio is going to be 1/2. Okay, now we're going to find the slope. My slope is my change in y over my change in x. My y values end at 2 and start at -3. And my x values end at 8 and start at -2. That gives me a slope of 5 over 10. Now what we're going to do is multiply that slope by my ratio of 1/2. We want 1/2 of the slope. When we multiply by 1/2, half of 5 is 2.5. Half of 10 is 5. So now I know that I need to change 2.5 in my y direction and 5 in my x direction. So now, to get the answer, I just take these two numbers and I add them to my original point. So now, the answer will be the point M is my point. It started at -2 for my x, and we're adding 5 to the x. And then we have -3 for the y, and we're adding 2.5. That means that M equals the point 3, -1/2. Alright, now I know what some of you guys are saying. I already know a formula that will let me do it even easier than that. Well, the way I want to show you this way, the reason I want to show you this way is because of what I want you to do with it next. Alright, let's see if we can find P such that AP is 2/3 of AB. If A is this point, -1, 2, and B is the point 5, 17. Okay, so what we're going to do is first find the ratio. Well, the ratio that we want is 2/3. Now we're going to find the slope. Alright, looks like my slope ends at 17 for my y, starts at 2, ends at 5, starts at -1. So that gives me a slope of 15/6. Now I'm going to multiply by my ratio. 15 times 2/3 is 10. 6 times 2/3 is 4. So now I know I need to add 10 to my y and 4 to my x. So now the final answer, the point P, is going to be, I'm going to add it to my original one. I'm going to start with -1 for my x, and I'm adding in 4. And start with 2 for my y, and add in 10. Which means that my point P is at 312. Alright, and last one. Let's see if we can find the endpoint B if A is 2/5 and we have the midpoint given to us. So first of all, what would the ratio be? Well, I already have one endpoint and the midpoint, and I'm trying to find the distance way over here to B. Well, it looks like I'm going to need to go twice as far from A to M. I'm going to need to double that to get all the way to B. So my ratio here is going to be 2, or 200% more. Okay, so the ratio is 2. Now I find the slope. My slope ends at 1 and came from 5, ended at 5, came from 2. So that gives me -4/3. When I multiply that by my ratio of 2, I have -8/6. And now I add -8 for my y and 6 for my x. So -2 is my x plus 6. And 5 for my y minus 8. That means my final answer is 8, -3. And we just found the point B, not the point A. Alright, great.